for today, pretty straightforward. Start out with a little introduction of myself. Then we're going to talk about what is SAS Viya Copilot, its architecture, and then the other half of the title, what's actually in Model Studio. We'll do a demo and then finish up with some questions. So, me. So I've been at SAS for 20 years. I work in the advanced analytics division. And I've actually worked on a bunch of different things in SAS through analytics, also done management, all sorts of stuff. If you want to talk to me more while you're here at Innovate, I'll actually be in the opening session tomorrow up on stage. So you're actually getting a little bit of a preview, so you could impress your colleagues by knowing what's about to happen. Also, I'll be working over at the SAS Viya Copilot booth. If you want to stop by and say hey, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. All right, so SAS Viya Copilot. So SAS Viya Copilot, first of all, let's go ahead and get this out of the way, is a Viya 4 feature. It's currently in private preview as of this month, and we're going to be going, goal is to be going GA on the Copilot in Model Studio, for example, in third quarter of this year. Now, the Copilot itself is actually not just what you see today, like inside of Model Studio. It's actually a set of features that's going to go across all of Viya. And so we're going to be rolling that out piece by piece in different applications. It is a software as a service piece, or it's Azure-based. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the architecture in just a second. If you have more questions about our general AI, or rather generative AI approach, you can also go to this other talk that's happening on Thursday. You'll get more of the roadmap of everything that I'm talking about today. And then down here in the bottom, it's got this little icon, and this is what you'll start seeing across SAS Viya applications that actually allow you to launch the Copilot. All right, so let's just take a quick minute and talk about the architecture of SAS Viya Copilot. So we get some questions about this, and so I think it's important to kind of understand where the pieces live and how they work. And so what I've drawn here is, first of all the way on the left-hand side, you'll see SAS Viya and different pieces that exist there. And then the rest of the stuff, everything to the right, we call the generative AI platform. All of that stuff that you see in that gray box is actually hosted inside of a SAS-run Azure subscription. So to turn on the different capabilities that we're talking about that you'll see in Viya, SAS is actually taking on the hosting of the generative AI pieces. We're actually taking the copilots themselves, which you can see here in the middle, and hosting them for you, and your Viya is then calling out to this subscription to get those different features. So, the different parts, again, like I said, inside the middle, we're taking on that burden so that you don't have to, because it's not easy to stand up these large language models. It's not easy to keep them up to date. Also, because it's kind of a software service approach, that means that we can update the copilots and they can get better without you having to update your Viya, right? So it's continuously learning and growing and getting better. So what does the flow kind of look like really quick, high level? So we're talking about Model Studio today. So you might be inside of Model Studio interacting with the SAS Viya Copilot. It goes through a piece that we call our Gen AI gateway. This is the single point of egress out of Viya, and it's only out. There is no calling back in, so that gray box we're talking about doesn't reach back into your Viya. We're only going to be calling out, right? So it calls out, and in this case actually hits the Model Studio Copilot that we've deployed for you. Now this is the same pattern that you'll see over and over again for the different types of features that we'll be rolling out inside of SAS Viya Copilot. So here I've listed visual analytics, you might see something in Visual Investigator, all of them going out to the same platform. The same platform that we, again, are hosting and has all these capabilities built into it. All right, so that's SAS Viya Copilot and kind of its architecture. Let's talk specifically about what I'm going to be showing today, which are the pieces that are being rolled out inside of Model Studio. So our real goal with adding Copilot to Model Studio is to make machine learning building of pipelines faster, make it easier, make it open to all types of users. So in order to do that, what we've done is we've pulled out 4 real high-level features that we're trying to add with Copilot. So I've listed those here. So the first one is the ability to explain different things that you might see within Model Studio. So you can think of this as explaining different types of models that exist, how pipelines work, you know, what is a pipeline comparison. Any of these terms that you may or may not be familiar with within Model Studio, we can help you with that using the Copilot. The next one I have listed here is the ability to actually suggest the next pieces that you should add to your pipeline. Right? So you've already built part of a pipeline and maybe you need, you know, a little help figuring out what should come next. Copilot can help with that, whether that's adding a single node or adding multiple nodes. The third feature that we're adding is the suggestions to improving existing nodes. Right? Not everyone is building, you know, machine learning pipelines from scratch. You might already have a pipeline, maybe it's even been in production for a long time. What you can do with the Copilot is you can still interact with that pipeline and actually get suggestions on ways to improve the individual pieces that you already have. And the last one that I've called out here is the ability to explain the output or the results of a particular node within a pipeline. So the idea here is that you might have you know, run a bunch of different models and you can actually see, you know, the data within the results of the different graphs and the different tables and things like that. Well, Copilot can take all that information together and actually give you a full summary of it, pointing out highlights of pieces that you might not have noticed and things maybe that you want to investigate a little bit more. Also on the right, we kind of called out a few more things here. And I want to point out the very last one on the bottom right, and that's the one-click implementation. And you'll see this when we go through the demo, that it's very easy to do these different actions and suggestions that the Copilot's giving you. That's the idea. We're going to give you a button, you click it once, and now your pipeline's built. You know, give you another button, you click it once, now your pipeline's improved. Right? We wanted to make it very easy, and that's what the Copilot is trying to do is, you know, reduce some of those tasks that might have been harder in the past down to something that can be done with a single click. Now I'll talk a little bit more here about the requirements. I kind of mentioned some of them already, right? We're talking Viya 4, whether that's SAS Viya, SAS Viya Enterprise, private preview. We are, like I said, opening that in 05, which is starting now. If you're interested in that, particularly if you are a hosted managed customer, please stop by the booth and we can talk about options there for private preview. And then I've already mentioned the SAS Viya subscription. So you do need to be able to call out of your Viya to the SAS Azure subscription to get these features. So that's something to be aware of when you're talking about how this might roll out in your particular company. All right, so that was all the slides. So let's just jump into a demo. All right, so here I am inside of Model Studio for anyone who hasn't seen it before. I'm gonna go ahead and open up my project. I'm actually gonna switch over here to the pipeline tab. So in this particular project, I'm working with some home loan data. And so I've started building a pipeline here, and it's got these 2 different nodes. I'm actually gonna go ahead and see if I can get the Copilot to help me build out the rest of this pipeline. So I'm gonna open up the Copilot. It's located up here in the top right. And again, this is the experience that you would expect to see in other Viya applications in the future. So Copilot's come up, and there's 2 different ways that I can interact with the Copilot in this window. First would be to click one of these buttons here, and then the second one would be to come down here and actually type. And we'll see both of those interactions throughout the demo. I'm actually going to start with one of the buttons up here at the top, and go ahead and get Copilot to suggest the next node to add. Now it's important to understand that when the Copilot's running here, again, it's calling out to that Azure subscription to get these suggestions. It's sending information about your pipeline and about your data. That would be metadata about it, you know, the types of columns that you have, maybe the skewness of them or anything like that. Information that's helpful to the Copilot. We're not actually sending out all of your data though. That's still staying inside of your own Viya. Copilot was able to actually, given that data, come back with these suggestions. Now these first ones that we see here came back pretty quick because those are rules-based suggestions, right? So you may just want a quick suggestion of what to do next. So Copilot might point out, oh, well, you've got data that's skewed, so you should run this type of node. Or I see that you're running on binary data, so this is an appropriate type of model to use. That's where these come from. And again, back to that one-click idea, I can click on one of these and easily get that added directly to my pipeline. But for the demo, we're going to come down here and run this longer process. So before I said that Copilot took all that information and did quick rules-based suggestions. What it's doing now is actually running through, and it's going to try to go beyond rules-based and actually run specific nodes with your pipeline and your data to bring back even better suggestions. This process is going to take a little bit longer, obviously, because we're actually running these nodes at this time. So we can see here, as the Copilot goes through, it's going to return back the results that it has so far. So initially, it came up with 2 models. I don't know if you called that, but they weren't great models. That's okay. It was his first try. Now it's coming back with even more models, actually in chains, right? So the first one that you see is a single node that is suggesting. Second one is actually suggesting 2 nodes. Now here are even more of them. And those chains can grow, right? Because depending on your data and what you're looking at, you might need to just add a single node, or Copilot might want to add 3 or 4 nodes, depending on what it sees as it's running through these different trials. The other thing that we're showing here as we're running these different trials is the KS value. Now, if you're not familiar with that, what that actually is it's the statistic that we've set inside this particular project to determine which model is the best. And so as we're running these models, we're using that specific statistic to rank them, right? So as we went through, the Copilot was re-ranking these based on that value. Now, if you were using a different selection criteria in your project, Copilot would use that one. In this case, I happened to use KS. KS, you wanted to get closer to 1, so that's why you see the higher numbers ranked at the top. All right, so it's come back with a couple of options here. And again, with that one click, we're going to go ahead and get these added to our pipeline. Now it's going to add all of the nodes, which we see there. And then it's also going to tell me the properties that it tuned specifically in those nodes, right? So when it was running those different iterations, it was tuning these properties, and these are the ones that match that selection criteria, that KS value that we saw before. Also, to be helpful, Copilot's come in here and added information about the properties. So if you weren't sure what one of these meant, it's provided you a little bit more information so that you can better understand what it said. So we quickly, with just a couple of clicks, have gone from a partially built pipeline to a fully built pipeline with nodes that are specifically tuned for the data we're working on. All right, I mentioned that we also will work on existing pipelines. So I'm going to click over here and select a different pipeline. Obviously more complicated, more work's gone into this one. And now we're going to see what we can do inside of this pipeline. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm actually going to select this node. And now I'm going to type in here and we're going to ask the Copilot to explain the node results. Now while that's running, I'm actually going to open up the results. It shows 2 things. One, so you can actually see what it's talking about, but also to point out that the Copilot is still available. We've drilled into the node, but you can still see the results that it's talking about. So the Copilot's gone off and it's collecting these results, these exact ones we see here on the screen. And now it's returned back this full text explanation of it. So I can scroll up and look at different things in here. It gives me kind of a high-level overview of what a forest model is. It's got some key findings in here about variable importance, and I can kind of match that up, right? I can see these are the top 5 listed here, and here's my variable importance. I see those exact same 5 listed over here. So the Copilot's taken all of that information we've seen on the left and turned it into this nice, concise summary over here on the right. Bunch of different things that it calls out, and even down here at the bottom, depending on what has happened in your model, it will give you a conclusion and maybe some things you should go and look at further. All right, so let's go ahead and close that. And the next thing we're going to do is actually we're going to ask the Copilot to improve this node, right? So we've looked at this, and we decide, okay, well maybe there's something that we should fix, we should make better. Let's ask the Copilot to help us with that. I'll go ahead and improve this node. Now this process looks similar to what we saw before, but instead of us trying to add new nodes, what we're doing here is we're running all of those trials on this one specific node. Again, we're still honoring all of the branches or flows that might have happened above, and we're still using the specific data that we've always been using, but now we're just targeting this one node and looking for improvements. It happens to have not found any in the first 2 trials. Okay, it's going to keep running. And as it does run, again, we'll continue to see the results appear here, and we'll also see that same KS value we've been talking about before. Here it is. And it actually shows you how much of an improvement it has made. Now remember, it's just focused on that one node, and so all of these trials are for this one specific node. All right, so it finished. Ran 45 trials here. Actually found a pretty good improvement. And it's also showing me that same information we saw before of these are the specific values that we should set in the node to actually achieve that new KS value. So again, back to the one click. Go ahead and we can apply these changes directly to that node. And if you were fast enough, you might have caught that it actually did change this number here, number of trees to match the number of trees there. So now I have all of those values applied to that node so that now when I run it, I should get the same KS value I saw above. We don't do, or modeling nodes aren't the only nodes that we improve on. We can also improve on the nodes farther up the chain. What it'll actually do in that case is the Copilot will actually pick the best model down below. And it will only change the node that you are on, but it'll still honor the rest of your flow. So you get both honoring the top of your flow and the bottom of your flow, even if you pick a node in the middle. Last thing I'll show really quickly here is the ability to ask questions about the product itself, which I mentioned earlier. So we'll ask for, what is model comparison? That happens to be this node down here at the bottom. Let's say I don't know what model comparison is. I could just ask the Copilot. It's actually gone and pulled all this information that you see here from the Model Studio documentation to answer this question. So while that actual question of what is model comparison doesn't exist in the documentation, we're able to pull out the information we need, send it off to a large language model, and get back this answer. So you can be interacting with the Copilot not only to improve your nodes or add nodes or do things specifically on your pipeline. You can also use the Copilot to just get more information, general information about things within Model Studio, things you're seeing on the screen, stuff like that. So that's everything I wanted to show for SAS Viya Copilot. Remember, this is this type of interaction that you see will be rolling out across multiple SAS Viya applications in the future. This is just the parts specifically to Model Studio. If you have more questions about this or any of the other things that we're rolling out, please stop by the booth. We're over in the SAS Spotlight area. And I think we have a couple of minutes for questions, if there are any. Any questions? Oh, yes.
So you said information only went out to Copilot, is that right?
Yes.
But so, again, just remind what the environment is here, where it looks like information's coming back in, or it's changing a value, you just said? And,
Right, very good question. Right, so when we make a call out of Copilot, let's say to make the, run the improvements, for example, what actually happens in that case is we're calling out to the Copilot to figure out what the user wants to do, but the actual work is done back in Viya. So it's a call out and the response, so one request, right? Request out, response back into Viya, and then all of the work is actually done inside of Viya itself. So when you click that button to apply those improvements, the Copilot understands what you're trying to do, and those improvements are applied just within Viya. We don't have to go back out to the Copilot to do that. We can do it in Viya, so we're not sending that out to actually make that change. We're making it specifically in that node that exists within your Viya.
excuse me, at the beginning, you had mentioned Azure. Is this also available in AWS?
Okay, so when I mentioned Azure, that's specifically where the SAS infrastructure is deployed. That is not where your SAS Viya has to be, because you're calling out to it, right? So you could be in AWS, that's where your Viya might be. You could call out to the Azure piece, right? It's just another web address it has to get to, right? So only the SAS infrastructure, the part that we are supporting, is in Azure. Viya can be, whether it's in the cloud or even on-prem, wherever that is running stays there. It's just our pieces, they're out in Azure. Any other questions? No? All right, thank you for your time.